All right, so are you ready to dive in? Today, we're going to take a deep look at the book of Jonah.
Sounds good.
But we're going way beyond like the whale and the big fish.
Right.
We're going to connect this to the New Testament, early church history.
Yeah.
And maybe even some surprising insights about your own life.
That's right.
Okay.
Jonah is one of those stories that seems like deceptively simple at first.
Yeah.
But when you start to look closer, you realize there's a lot more going on there.
Uh-huh.
So it's about, God's mercy, sure.
Right.
But it's also about us confronting our own prejudices.
Right.
And how we respond when God's calling us to move outside of what we're comfortable with.
Okay, so let's set the scene here. Jonah, he's a prophet in ancient Israel. He gets a direct order from God.
Okay.
Go to Nineveh and preach.
Right.
Problem is, Nineveh is the capital of Assyria. This is an empire that's known for its ruthlessness.
Right.
You know, think like ancient Rome, but with more chariots and way less mercy.
Yeah, and the book of Nahum really drives that point home. I mean, it gives you this vivid picture of just how brutal Nineveh was. Their violence, their exploitation, and even like their arrogance in thinking that they could, defy God himself.
So basically, Nineveh is like the ultimate frenemy for the Israelites. And it's not really a surprise that Jonah has zero interest in going there.
Yeah.
In fact, the original Hebrew suggests that his reluctance is way more than just a mild dislike.
Right.
It's like a deep...
It's visceral.
Yeah.
Like deep hatred.
Yeah, visceral hatred.
It raises this interesting question, I think.
Yeah.
Have you ever felt that intensely about somebody? Like where even the thought of being in the same room makes your skin crawl.
Yeah.
So Jonah's experience, as extreme as it might seem,
it's
actually tapping into this very human struggle.
Yeah.
Of like, what does it mean to love your enemies?
Right.
When you feel this like overwhelming disgust.
Yeah, it's like that saying, love the sinner, hate the sin.
Right.
Like amplified to this epic, like biblical scale.
Yeah, totally.
So what does Jonah do? Does he suck it up?
Right.
And like a good prophet, head to Nineveh?
He does not.
No.
He does not. He pulls a complete 180.
Wow.
And heads to the port of Joppa.
Okay.
And books passage on a ship to Tarshish.
Okay, so he's literally running away.
Yes.
To like the most distant point imaginable.
Right.
What does that tell us about where his head's at?
It's total rejection of God's call.
Yeah.
So Tarshish, in this biblical context, represents like the furthest point you could possibly travel from Israel.
Okay.
And it's not just geographically significant. There's this powerful imagery in the Hebrew text of Jonah constantly like descending.
Oh,
so he descends to Joppa, descends into the ship.
Right.
He's descending into kind of like this spiritual pit of his own making.
Wow. Yeah.
And here's a detail that always gets me. Jonah actually pays for his ticket to Tarshish.
Oh, wow.
He's willing to shell out like hard cash to run away from God.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder.
It does.
What lengths will we go to avoid the things that make us uncomfortable, even when we know deep down we shouldn't?
Absolutely. It really highlights the cost of disobedience. He's not just passively resisting, like he's actively investing in his rebellion.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And then, of course, comes the storm.
Right.
The ship gets caught in this ferocious tempest.
Yeah.
And everybody is freaking out except
for Jonah.
Yeah.
He's sound asleep below deck.
Oh, wow.
And it's not just any sleep. The Hebrew word that's used is radem. And that's the same word that they use for anesthesia.
Wow.
So he's completely oblivious to the danger around him.
That's a stark contrast to that story of Jesus asleep in the boat.
Right.
During a storm.
Yeah. Where Jesus, even while he's sleeping, is aware of the truth.
Yes.
And ultimately uses that to teach the disciples about faith.
Exactly.
Jonah, on the other hand, he's asleep to the physical danger.
Right.
And the spiritual reality of everything.
Oh, what's going on?
It's like he's just chosen to shut the world out entirely.
Yeah. Which brings us to the significance of Joppa itself.
Okay.
So this port city, it plays like a surprisingly important role in both Jonah's story and the New Testament.
Okay.
So it was a major entry point into Israel with this rich history going all the way back to the building of the first and second temples.
So Joppa is where all that cedar wood was shipped from Lebanon. That was the stuff they used to build those sacred spaces.
Right. So it's literally connecting Israel to the wider world.
Right.
And in the same way, Jonah's story is connecting the Old Testament to the New Testament.
Wow. I never thought about that.
Yeah. And here's where it gets even more interesting. Joppa is also where, years later, the Apostle Peter has his vision of the sheet that's lowered from heaven, filled with all those animals that were, considered unclean by Jewish law.
Hold on. So you're saying that, like, the events of Jonah's story might have, like, directly impacted the place where Peter had that pivotal vision?
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely a thought-provoking connection.
Okay.
That vision described in Acts 10 leads Peter to preach to Cornelius, a Roman centurion.
Right.
And that's like a huge moment for the early church.
Yeah.
Because it marks the beginning of the gospel spreading outside of just the Jewish people to the Gentiles.
Wow, that's huge.
Right.
And it directly mirrors like Jonah's reluctance to preach to the Ninevites. That's like foreshadowing.
It's more than just a parallel, though.
Okay.
I think it really highlights this underlying theme that we see in the Bible of challenging our own prejudices and recognizing that God's grace, it extends to all people.
Yeah.
Even those that we might consider outsiders or enemies.
But what's fascinating is that, like, Peter initially resists this call.
He does.
Just like Jonah.
He does. He even says, Lord, I've never eaten anything that is common or unclean.
Right.
So he's holding on to those, ingrained beliefs about who is and isn't worthy.
Right. But unlike Jonah.
Yeah. He eventually recognizes the truth of the vision.
Yeah.
And obeys God's command. He sees that the old rules no longer apply.
Yeah.
And he embraces this, like, radical new idea of inclusivity.
And then there's this detail in Matthew 16 when Jesus affirms Peter as the rock that he'll build his church on.
Right.
He calls him Simon, son of Jonah.
Wow.
Like, is that just a coincidence?
It's hard to believe it is.
Yeah.
Given all the other connections we've just talked about. It seems to suggest that Peter is not just, a spiritual descendant of Jonah.
Yeah.
But also an heir to Jonah's legacy.
Oh, wow.
He's a man who, like Jonah, had to learn about God's, unlimited mercy.
Right.
And the importance of reaching beyond his comfort zone to share that message with everybody.
So we have this reluctant prophet, Jonah, who's like foreshadowing the reluctance of the early church to embrace the Gentiles.
Right.
It's like history is repeating itself.
That is.
On a spiritual level.
Yeah.
And what's fascinating is, like, this keeps repeating itself throughout history, even today.
Right.
We all have our own, like, Ninevites, the people or groups that we just would rather exclude, the ones that we judge as, like, unworthy of God's love.
Totally.
Okay, hold on. My mind is officially blown right now.
Right.
We went from this guy running from God to, like, the foundation of the early church.
Right.
And now we're talking about our own personal prejudices.
Exactly.
It's getting deep.
It is.
But before we go there, let's go back to Jonah and that storm.
Okay.
What happens next?
Well, remember, Jonah is down below deck, sound asleep.
Right.
And the ship is about to be, like, swallowed by the waves.
Talk about burying your head in the sand.
Right.
You'd think he'd be, like, I don't know, praying or something.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. The sailors, they aren't theologians.
Right.
But they realize that something is seriously wrong.
Right.
And so they start throwing cargo overboard.
Yeah.
Desperate to lighten the load.
Okay.
And they're even calling out to their own gods for help.
So it's a total panic situation.
Yeah.
Everybody is on edge.
Yeah.
Except for Jonah, who's basically just taking a nap in the middle of a hurricane.
That's right.
That's amazing.
And in this moment of, like, total irony, the captain, he's a Gentile, goes down to Jonah. He's like, "What are you doing sleeping? Wake up. Call out to your God. Maybe he'll consider us and we won't die."
Wow. So the prophet is being called to action by the very people he's trying to avoid.
I know, right?
It's like the universe is giving him a wake-up call.
Yeah,
literally.
Literally, it underscores this idea that everyone, regardless of their background or their beliefs, seems to recognize that they need something greater than themselves.
Right.
In times of crisis.
Yeah.
Even these, pagan sailors are looking for a higher power that can save them.
Okay, but, like, Do they actually know that Jonah's running from God?
That's a good question.
Or do they just think he's like some lazy dude who's sleeping through the apocalypse?
Right. The text doesn't explicitly say if they know.
Okay.
But it's pretty clear that they suspect something is off.
Right.
So they decide to cast lots.
Okay.
To figure out who is responsible for this like divine wrath.
Oh, wow.
And surprise, surprise.
Yeah.
The lot falls on Jonah.
I bet that got his attention.
Right.
Like, it's fascinating to me.
Yeah.
How these sailors, even with their limited understanding of the God of Israel, they seem to sense that Jonah's connected to the storm.
Yeah.
It's like there's some cosmic justice at play.
I know. It is interesting. Yeah. Casting lots was like a common practice in ancient times.
Okay.
It was a way of trying to figure out what God wanted or like to find out his judgment.
Right.
So for the lot to fall on Jonah, it suggests that even the sailors, maybe without knowing it, are tapping into this spiritual truth.
Yeah, that's a good point.
They confront him.
They do, demanding to know what he's done and who he is.
Right.
And finally, Jonah confesses.
Okay.
He says, I'm a Hebrew, and I fear the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the dry land.
So he's admitting it. He's a follower of the God of Israel, who has power over these like crazy forces of nature that are raging around them.
But there's like this underlying irony, right? Because he claims to fear the Lord, yet he spent the whole story running away from God's command.
Yeah.
So it reveals this like tension that I think we all experience between, you know, what we say we believe, and then our actions like totally tell a different story.
Yeah, like how often do we say we believe in something, but then what we do is completely different?
Yeah, that's a question for the ages.
It is a question for the ages.
But back on the ship,
the
sailors are understandably like terrified.
Yeah, I mean, they're in a storm. And they're like, what do we do with you to make the sea calm down?
Okay.
And this is where we see this glimmer of selflessness in Jonah.
Wait, really?
I know.
After all this running and hiding, he actually steps up.
He does. He tells them, pick me up and throw me into the sea.
Oh, wow.
And then everything will be fine because this is all my fault.
So he's finally admitting his responsibility for their suffering. But that couldn't have been easy.
No, definitely not. But in that moment, he's willing to sacrifice himself to save them.
Right.
So it's a spark of redemption amidst all the disobedience.
Okay, so they're all on board with this.
Not so fast. The sailors, even though they're terrified, they hesitate.
Okay.
They don't want to be responsible for Jonah's death.
Yeah.
So they try rowing harder, you know, appealing to their own gods.
Right.
But the storm just keeps getting worse.
Oh, wow.
And so finally they realize they don't have a choice.
Yeah.
So they pray to Jonah's God for mercy.
Okay.
And they throw him overboard.
So Jonah, who tried to get as far away from God as possible, ends up getting plunged into the depths of the sea.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
It's almost poetic.
It is.
And as soon as he's in the water,
yeah,
the sea is completely calm.
Wow.
So the sailors, seeing this this sudden change, they're just filled with awe and reverence for this God that they just met.
Right.
So they offer sacrifices.
Okay.
And they make vows, recognizing the power of the God of Israel.
That is remarkable.
It is.
Like they go from worshiping pagan gods to acknowledging the one true God in like a matter of hours.
Yeah, it's a real conversion experience.
Yeah, it is.
But what about Jonah?
Right.
We left him sinking beneath the waves.
Yeah, you can't leave me hanging like that.
I know.
We've got to find out what happens next.
Well, Jonah's down there, below deck.
Right.
Sound asleep.
Yeah.
While the ship is, you know, about to be swallowed by the waves.
Talk about burying your head in the sand.
I know.
You'd think he'd be like praying or something.
Right. Well, that's the thing.
Okay.
The sailors, they aren't like theologians or anything.
Right.
But they realize that something is seriously wrong.
Oh, okay.
And so they start throwing cargo overboard. Yeah, desperate to lighten the ship.
To lighten the load,
Yeah, and they're even calling out to their own gods for help.
So it's total panic.
Total panic.
Yeah.
Everybody is on edge.
Right.
Except for Jonah.
Of course.
Who's basically taking a nap.
Right.
In the middle of a hurricane.
Yeah. Incredible.
I know. And in this moment.
Yeah.
Of like total irony.
Okay.
The captain of the ship who's a Gentile, goes down to Jonah and says, what do you mean you're sleeping?
Oh, wow.
Get up.
Yeah.
Call out to your God.
Right.
Maybe he'll consider us and we won't die.
Wow. So the prophet's being called to action by the very people that he's trying to avoid.
Right.
It's like the universe is giving him a wake-up call.
It is, literally.
Yeah, literally, yeah.
It underscores this idea that everyone, regardless of their background or their beliefs, seems to just kind of innately recognize that they need something bigger than themselves. In times of crisis, even these pagan sailors are grasping at a higher power that might offer them salvation.
Okay, but do the sailors actually know that Jonah's running from God?
That's a good question.
Or do they just think he's some lazy dude who's just like sleeping through the apocalypse? You know, like what's going on?
The text doesn't say.
Okay.
Like explicitly if they know.
Yeah, okay.
But it's pretty clear that they suspect something's not right.
Yeah, yeah.
And so they decide to cast lots.
Interesting.
Yeah. To figure out who's responsible for this divine wrath.
Right, right.
And surprise, surprise.
Yeah.
The lot falls on Jonah.
I bet that got his attention.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me.
It is interesting.
How these sailors, even with, you know, their limited understanding of the God of Israel, they seem to sense that Jonah is connected to this storm. Yeah. Like some cosmic justice is at play.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah.
So the practice of casting lots,
it
was really common in ancient times.
Right.
It was a way of seeking guidance.
Right.
Divine guidance or judgment.
Okay.
So for the lot to fall on Jonah suggests that even the sailors, maybe unknowingly, they're tapping into some spiritual truth.
Yeah, for sure.
And so they confront him.
Yeah.
And demand to know, what have you done?
Yeah.
And who are you?
Right.
And finally, Jonah confesses.
Okay.
He says, I'm a Hebrew, and I fear the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the dry land.
So he's admitting it.
Yeah.
He's a follower of the God of Israel.
Yes.
A God who has power over these forces of nature that are raging around them.
Right. Exactly.
But there's this underlying irony, right?
Totally.
Because he claims to fear the Lord, yet he spent this whole story running away.
I know, right?
From God's command.
Yeah, it reveals this tension that we all experience, I think.
Right.
Between what we say we believe and then what we actually do.
Right.
Like how often do we say we believe something?
Right, exactly.
But then our actions tell a completely different story.
Yeah, it's a question for the ages.
It is a question for the ages.
But back on the ship.
Okay.
The sailors are understandably terrified.
They're in the middle of the storm, right?
Right, yeah, yeah. So they ask Jonah, what should we do to you so that the sea will calm down?
That the sea will quiet down for us.
Yeah.
And this is where I think we see this like glimmer of selflessness in Jonah.
Wait, really?
I know, right?
After all this running and hiding, he steps up.
He does.
Wow.
He tells them, pick me up and hurl me into the sea.
Wow.
And then the sea will quiet down for you.
Right.
Because I know that it's because of me.
Right.
That this is happening.
So he's finally acknowledging his responsibility for their suffering.
Yes.
But I bet that was not easy.
No, it definitely wasn't. But in that moment, he's willing to sacrifice himself to save them.
Wow.
And so it's like a spark of redemption, right?
Right.
Amidst all the disobedience.
Okay, so they're all on board with tossing him overboard.
Not so fast.
Oh, no.
The sailors, even though they're terrified, they hesitate.
Yeah.
I mean, they don't want to be responsible.
Of course.
For Jonah's death, right?
Right, yeah.
So they try rowing harder. They appeal to their own gods.
Okay.
But the storm just keeps getting worse.
Wow.
And so finally, they realize they don't have a choice.
Right.
They pray to Jonah's God for mercy.
Okay.
And then they throw him into the sea.
So Jonah, who tried to descend to the depths of the earth to escape God, ends up being plunged into the depths of the sea.
Yes, it's almost poetic.
It is, yeah.
And just as Jonah predicted, as soon as he's overboard, the sea becomes calm.
Wow.
And the sailors, witnessing this sudden change, they're filled with awe and reverence for this God they've only just encountered.
Right.
They offer sacrifices.
Okay.
They make vows.
Okay.
Recognizing the power of the God of Israel.
Yeah, their transformation is remarkable.
It is remarkable.
Like they go from worshiping these pagan gods to acknowledging the one true God in like a matter of hours.
Yeah, talk about a conversion experience, right?
Yeah, really.
But what about Jonah?
Right.
We left him sinking beneath the waves.
Yeah, you can't leave me hanging like that.
I know.
We got to find out what happens next. Okay, so last we left off, Jonah was taking an unplanned swim courtesy of some very desperate sailors.
Right.
And things weren't looking too good.
Not great, no.
Middle of the ocean.
Yeah, this is where the story gets really bizarre and theologically profound.
All right, here we go. This is the part everybody remembers.
This is the one. So the text tells us that God appointed a great fish to swallow Jonah.
Okay, hold on. Appointed by God, a giant fish.
Yeah.
Sounds like something straight out of Hollywood.
Definitely one of the most iconic and debated images in the Bible.
Yeah.
Some people take it literally. Others see it as a metaphor.
Okay.
For, Jonah descending into the depths of despair and isolation.
Right.
But no matter how you interpret it, the point is clear. Jonah is facing the consequences of his actions.
Right. Literally swallowed up by his own choices.
Yeah, he's in the belly of this fish.
Okay, so what's he doing in there all this time?
Right.
Singing sea shanties.
He actually starts to pray.
Okay.
And his prayer is this incredible mix of like poetry, repentance.
Wow.
And even a little bit of resentment.
Okay.
So he acknowledges God's power.
Right.
And his mercy.
Okay.
But he also reveals his frustration and anger.
So even in the belly of a fish, Jonah's still wrestling with God's grace.
Right.
And his own prejudices.
Yeah, it's almost comical.
Yeah.
But also like really tragic.
Yeah.
He just can't escape this like core conflict of the story.
Right. Yeah.
No matter how deep he goes.
Yeah, it really does.
It speaks to, I think, the human condition.
Yeah. Yeah.
We can run, we can hide.
Yeah.
But we can't escape ourselves.
Right.
Or the consequences of our choices.
And Jonah's prayer, even for all its flaws, it reveals something else.
What's that?
He uses this imagery and language from the Psalms, and it highlights these themes of like salvation and deliverance.
Right. So even in his rebellion, he's still holding on to his faith.
He's still connected. Yeah.
Exactly. He hasn't like totally abandoned God.
Okay.
He's still clinging to those threads of belief.
Right.
Even if they are tangled up with resentment.
In begrudging acceptance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then after 3 days,
the
fish vomits Jonah onto dry land.
It's like this cosmic do-over.
It is. The text is very specific.
Okay.
It says, and the Lord spoke to the fish.
Right.
And it vomited Jonah out upon the dry land.
Yeah.
So it's not just like a random thing.
Right.
It's a deliberate act of God intervening.
Right.
It's an act of grace.
So round 2, God gives Jonah the same instructions.
Yeah.
Go to Nineveh and proclaim to it the message that I tell you.
Right. Does he run again?
What do you think?
This time, he obeys.
Wow.
But he's still not happy about it.
Right.
His sermon is really short, blunt.
Okay.
Completely devoid of any hope or compassion.
Right.
He basically says, you guys have 40 days and then it's all over.
So he's like technically following orders.
He is.
But there's no heart in it.
No.
He's just going through the motions.
Right. And here's the crazy part.
Okay.
The people of Nineveh actually believe him.
Really?
They do. They declare a fast.
Wow.
They put on sackcloth. They turn from their evil ways.
The Ninevites.
Yeah. Even the king of Nineveh humbles himself before God and urges the whole city to repent.
Hold on, seriously. The Ninevites, these people known for, their brutality and arrogance, they actually repent.
They do. And it's like a pivotal moment in the story.
Yeah.
Because it challenges our assumptions.
Right.
About who is capable of change.
Right.
And who's worthy of redemption.
It shows that even the hardest of hearts can be softened.
Totally.
By genuine remorse and turning towards God.
Exactly.
Okay, so what does God do? Does he still destroy the city?
No.
No.
He sees their sincere repentance.
Yeah.
And so he spares Nineveh from destruction.
Which is, of course, exactly what Jonah didn't want.
Of course.
He is furious, throws a tantrum.
Yeah, a full-blown tantrum.
Accuses God of being too merciful, too forgiving.
Yeah, I mean, he'd rather see the Ninevites wiped out
right.
than experience God's grace extended to them.
So it's like Jonah's missed the point of his entire journey.
Yeah, his anger shows how deep his prejudice goes.
Right.
And his inability to grasp like the true nature of God's love.
Which is boundless and all-encompassing.
Yeah.
He wants justice.
Right.
But only for those he deems deserving.
Right.
How does God respond?
With a gentle but pointed lesson.
Okay.
God provides this like shady plant to shelter Jonah from the sun.
Okay.
But then he sends a worm to wither the plant.
Oh, wow.
Leaving Jonah exposed and miserable.
I'm seeing a theme here.
Right.
Jonah keeps having these physical experiences that mirror his internal struggles.
Yeah.
The descent into the ship, the fish, the scorching sun, the withered plant, it's all symbolic.
Right. And this final scene is like a parable within a parable.
Okay.
So the plant represents God's compassion.
Right.
Even for rebellious Jonah.
Right.
But Jonah's concern for the plant,
yeah,
while he has no compassion for the people of Nineveh, exposes the hypocrisy of his anger.
God asks him straight up, are you right to be angry about the plant?
He does.
And Jonah, stubborn as ever, replies, yes, I am right to be angry enough to die.
Yeah. And then comes this really poignant message.
Okay.
At the end of the book,
all right,
God says, you pity the plant, which you didn't even plant or grow, which appeared one night and died the next. But shouldn't I pity Nineveh, that great city, with all those people who don't know right from wrong, and all the animals too?
Wow. It's like a mic drop moment.
It is.
God's basically saying, you care more about a plant than thousands of people. Get your priorities straight.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a powerful ending.
It is.
It leaves us with more questions than answers.
Yeah.
And it challenges us to look at our own hearts, our own prejudices, and our own capacity for compassion.
Right.
It asks, who are the Ninevites in our lives?
Right.
The ones that we think aren't worthy of forgiveness or understanding.
The book of Jonah isn't just some whimsical tale about a prophet and a big fish.
Yeah.
It's an exploration of God's mercy, the challenge of loving our enemies, and the call to rise above our limitations to embrace this wider, more inclusive vision of the world. Yeah. It's a call to action for all of us.
Yeah, to look at our own hearts and ask ourselves, are we willing to extend grace?
Yeah.
Even to those who we think don't deserve it.
This has been an incredible journey.
It has.
Thank you for joining us as we dove deep into the book of Jonah.
Absolutely.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep into the mysteries of life.